Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Dyro here with another Options and Play video update. So earnings are on the radar today. It's Friday. It's a pretty pretty busy night and morning of headlines, although kind of a slower session overall. So just a good day. It's a good afternoon to start focusing on next week. Um, we have a 3-day weekend, right? So great. It kind of lets you take a break, step away, rest up, relax, recharge the batteries, right? And to be honest, missing Mondays is really not that big of a deal, right? Because in terms of news flow, it's Mondays are typically the slowest days of the week. So, I can get used to these 4-day weeks where we just skip right over Monday and shoot right into Tuesday. Speaking of which, let's just jump right into it. So, um, obviously, nothing on Monday. Markets are closed. So the first time we're going to get a look at earnings is going to be Tuesday before the open, and we start off with a bang. Walmart pricing in 4.5 points. So you can see very clearly that Walmart's pushing up into a really big level, right? The 100 level. So this was one of the few retailers that didn't give holiday sales in January. So you can expect a pretty volatile move on Tuesday. Coming off two solid quarters in a row, okay. Even though this past quarter it didn't respond great, but it was a solid quarter. Uh, Big move here, right? Solid quarter again. Closest peer is probably Target. Had a pretty solid sales update. I'm bullish biased on Walmart because I feel like the numbers should be pretty good. But considering it's the holiday quarter, it could really be set up for a pretty big move. I mean, you can see each time it's failed at 100 in the past, it's rolled over into like the mid to low 90s. So um, strangles strangles the way to go. You could be bullish biased, but probably thinking either way there could be like $5, right? I mean it's priced at 4.5, but either way maybe like 5 to 6. So get up to retest the high or get down to retest this 94 area where it seems to have a magnet each time it fails here. But anyway, that in terms of market cap is the biggest name next week, and it's certainly going to have a big impact on other retailers on Tuesday. So definitely one of the bigger names. Also, Tuesday before the bell, Medtronic pricing in about 3 points. This thing got hammered at the J.P. Morgan conference. Management was talking about slower growth. It's recovered all of it and then some, but overall, kind of like a tough setup into earnings, right? It really it seems like it only moves when it has like a really great setup on earnings. It's not typically that big of a mover to begin with, and really the times that it works is when there's a really clean setup. Back here, nice trending breakout, and right now it's just kind of sloppy. It's got a big drop, big rally, kind of back into like a no man's land. Um, just a lot of congestion in this vicinity. So I'm personally leaning towards avoiding this one. I've definitely traded this one in the past. I've had some success with this, so I like it as a trading name, but specifically into earnings, I just don't love it one way or the other. So probably going to avoid this one. Okay, so also on Tuesday, and then so Tuesday before the open, CLR, but kind of like lumping that together with like a bunch of other names after the close on Tuesday, which you have Diamondback, FANG, Devon, Concho. So it's kind of like a trend next week that you'll see. There's going to be a lot of E&P names reported, and with such like a, a, a large grouping of one specific area within like the energy sector, I feel like probably worth a trade in XOP. Right, this is the specific like E&P like pure play, and I mean a lot of these E&P names are just in these really sideways charts, and I feel like it's like a good time to get involved. I mean oil, right? You can see oil's just working on possibly a breakout here. Exxon, Chevron, Occidental, all decent numbers and decent responses. I mean, some better than others, obviously, but thinking, maybe like step in the water and nibble on a move for a potential breakout. With so many names reported in such a small window and oil starting to show some positive indicators, I'm thinking bullish about an XOP, just because as opposed to targeting one individual E&P name, just like a bet on the overall like group. So that's what I'm thinking with XOP. So keep an eye out for that. Also Tuesday after the close, 5-9. I don't know if you know this one. It's a small cap software play, priced in about 6 points. Been on a really nice run. It's a strong run. It's not too extended. It's obviously it's obviously been a big move, but it's not super extended. Coming off back-to-back here and here, back-to-back beat and raise quarters. It could be a nice speculative bullish play. It would have to be spreads though, because the options are a little bit more expensive, and they're monthly. So just to lower debit. These types of setups have been a little bit tougher to get paid on, things that are at their 52-week high. But overall, trend is higher. Numbers have been really good. Software stocks are still acting great. So if anything, thinking like a speculative bullish bet on that one. All right, Wednesday before the open, ADI, one of the big chip names. So pricing in about 4.25. We're at the tail end of chip stocks, of chip reports for the quarter, right? And I can't get over the impression that a lot of expectations are already built in here. This thing has had a huge move in response to numerous chip stocks rallying after earnings. Kind of like AMAT today, right? Rallied into it and then sold off after. Like AMAT had like a similar number as most of the other ones, but because it had such like a huge run into it, today it's pulling back. And I'm kind of thinking like the same scenario on ADI. It's had a huge run in sympathy with all the other chip stocks, and maybe like a bearish bet targeting like a pullback into like the 100, high 90s, right? Saying that the stock needs to cool off, and the numbers really have not been that impressive. So maybe like a bearish bet, if anything. I normally don't like to trade the third, fourth, fifth. In this case, like the 12th similar report in a sector. So I don't know if I'll do anything with it, but that's what I'd be thinking. Also Wednesday before the open, CVS pricing in about 375. So it's got hit pretty hard in December, like a lot of things, but unlike a lot of things, it hasn't really bounced back, and it's just kind of sitting. You can see here, it's just kind of sitting, basically at the low of like this trend from last year. Last quarter it rallied on decent numbers, but overall, it's been really mixed. The chart doesn't look great, but if it gets up through like the low 70s, then there's room higher, and if it's weak, there is open room just to get down and retest the 63 area, right? 62, 63, and that's about 6 to 7 points. So at 4, if with the pricing in under a little under 4, there could be room there. It's averaged over 4 the last 2 quarters, so maybe like a out of the money, cheaper, lower debit strangle, right? Just to say like, okay, potentially maybe it gets up through and up into like the high 70s or fails and rolls back down. That's what I'm thinking. But it's kind of in like a weird area, and it hasn't really been performing well. But maybe like a cheap strangle, right? Just in case it gets like that $6 to $7 extension versus like the 375 it's pricing. Also tentatively scheduled for Wednesday. They haven't confirmed this yet, but ICPT, Intercept. Earnings are going to be probably irrelevant to this because it's all about phase 3 NASH, and this is, if not the biggest binary biotech event of the year, top 2. So March options are pricing in about 55 points. And basically everything I've read has said that this, if positive, this is like $200, and if negative, it's like $50. So there is a lot of room in either direction depending on the outcome of this trial. So I wrote up this trade. I've still been monitoring it. If you guys are interested, we're kind of getting into the window where you want to be involved. It's just the options are super thin. Well, the volume has been picking up, but the spreads have remained really wide, which is really frustrating, just from like a trading point of view, because you can't get filled at good prices. But I wrote it up because I want you guys to be aware of it. This is going to be a potentially massive mover once this data comes out. I don't know if it's going to be this week, but it will be by the end of March at the latest. So it's coming, and it's going to be crazy. So if you guys are interested, it's probably now is the time that you want to start looking to get involved. All right. Wednesday after the close, cheesecake. Pricing in about 4 points. Restaurant stock's been pretty volatile, and performance overall has been pretty good. Cheesecake, one of those names, it's had some really big moves in the past, and it's sitting not at its 52-week low because it popped at the beginning of January, but prior to that, it was right around its 52-week low. So, I'm leaning slightly bullish, thinking maybe it plays some catch up to the overall group, which is broadly higher, right? There's the handful that are trading their 52-week high. Last quarter was a non-event here. But the quarter before that, it moved 8, right? So options are priced in 4. Last quarter didn't move that. Quarter before that, it moved 8. So it's not super consistent. So this would be more speculative. But maybe if positive, get back up into the 50s. You could theoretically look at like a strangle too, just because there's like a really well-defined gap underneath and support down to 42. But it flies under the radar a bit, but every once in a while you get like a really wild move on cheesecake, and to me, like that's interesting because especially with like the whole sector, well, most of the sector performing really well. This one like really stands out as an underperformer, and maybe that's set to change this quarter. So we'll see. Also, Wednesday after the close, Trinity. TRN. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this one. It's a rail car maker. So let's go back here. All right, so Trinity pricing in 1.6 points. Thinking maybe a straddle here. All right, so it's typically a mover. Got dumped back in the fall. So typically a mover. Interesting chart, right? It's pushing up through the top of resistance. Got kind of like an air pocket. Relatively heavily shorted. It's had a big run off the low. Options aren't too bad. 1.6 points. I feel like there could be room either way, so maybe actually straddle in this case, just because the options are kind of in line with the risk that we like to do. So maybe a straddle on Trinity. Thinking about it, might be more of like a game time decision, but that's like the early look on Trinity. Okay, Thursday before the open, Domino's, another restaurant stock. So there's pricing in about 20 points, which is a little under 10%. It's hanging out just off its 52-week high. Today got hit, but overall just off its 52-week high. It's been on a really nice run this year, and the problem with Domino's is that earnings really have been less of events recently. There hasn't been like significant move on an earnings report. You probably have to go all the way back to like April of last year. So it's been a while. It's just it hasn't been the volatile name that it once was. Options are priced like what it used to be, and it's not really reflecting like the new reality of the stock that just doesn't move that much. So, I like the restaurant sector overall, and Domino's is an interesting name in the group, but at 20 points, I just don't see a trade there. And I think that's probably ultimately what's going to keep me away. It's just the options and the lack of like a recent big moves on earnings. Also Thursday before the open, FND, Floor and Decor. So this is kind of like a favorite trading name of mine. So it's just around earnings because that's really when it moves. So it's priced into 4.5 points, and it's actually averaged a 9-point move the last 2 quarters. It's even bigger if I go back further, which is amazing. It moved 8 points last quarter was a $25 stock, just to give you an idea. So I mean, this thing can really crank when it wants to. Um, so I'm bullish biased on this for two reasons. A, last quarter was pretty solid, and B, the home suppliers, some competitors, so like Mohawk, for instance, had a pretty good quarter, which um, probably bodes well for Floor and Decor, kind of like similar businesses. And I think that group might be trying to turn the corner. So I'm thinking maybe like a speculative bullish bet here. Or you could think of a strangle, maybe stagger it though with like 2-to-1 risk to reward, 2-to-1 risk on the bull side versus the bear. Just because I mean there has been some wild moves, but I mean I'm thinking more bullish on this one this quarter. Hey, okay, yeah, Thursday after the close, pretty busy. So start off with AAOI. It's priced in about 275. Pretty interesting. I mean, this thing used to be wild, just absolute nuts, and it's obviously had a massive fall from grace. So it's hanging out just at its 52-week low. Really awful sentiment overall. Uh, you know what? Bad numbers, bad sentiment. You know what that meant this quarter? Big rally. So I mean, this is only one of like. I mean, you'd have to try to find stocks that have gotten hit like that have gotten smashed into earnings and smashed after. It seems like things that got hit hard into earnings bounce back big after earnings. So you know, just playing like the character of the tape right now. I'm thinking bullish, looking for because this thing is still pretty heavily shorted. So maybe like a move back into the high teens, 20 area. I mean, like how many tech stocks have you seen that have been like this and rallied even if they like missed and guided lower, right? I mean, it's such an unusual, mixed up, muddled up quarter when it comes to these types of setups that I'm thinking just straight bullish bet on this. Um, and something like mid maybe high teens, looking for movements like the 20 area. Baidu, 10.5 points. So this thing, unlike a lot of China tech names, this thing really hasn't turned the corner. Still just in like an aggressive downtrend. Um, it's just really been out of play, to be honest. I mean, it's just hasn't been able to break the downtrend. Earnings really haven't been that great. Hasn't been that big of a catalyst. Uh, I mean, in the context of some of the quarters and some of the moves that Baidu's had, like 10.5 is pretty low, but it would have to be really good or really bad, seemingly, to break this trend. Just because it's a really well defined trend, and if anything, maybe you go like further out of the money, like maybe like 15 points, 20 points either way. Just thinking, maybe if the volatility will expand after earnings, and if it has if it breaks the trend finally, maybe the volatility will expand. So you could try some like more like lotto style, like way out of the money stuff. But other than that, like this is probably gonna be a wait and see. As much as like it's had potential and moved in the past, like this quarter specifically, it just doesn't look that compelling to me. Dropbox, pricing in 2 points. So actually pretty low in the context of some of the moves that Dropbox has had. So I honestly I just feel like traders lost interest in this. You know, it was a kind of like a volatile IPO, and then it just all the volatility dried up and it just like ground lower. It's pushing up into 25 resistance, so it's had a nice move this year, pushing up into 25 resistance, right? Uh, if positive, it has room up into the 30 range, and interestingly, like this kind of grind lower has kind of like reset the valuation a little bit, so it's not as high as it once was. So there could be some upside here, and with software stocks acting better, valuation not too bad. Maybe if they like deliver, you get like the pop up into 30, and the options only priced in two. Potentially like $4.5 with options only pricing in like two. It doesn't seem too bad to me. First Solar, another one Thursday after the close, pricing in 4 points. So this one could really be set up for a pretty big move. I mean, like if you look at the chart, well, not only has this like had some big moves in the past, but basically right at like kind of like a critical level. So it's at a pretty critical level, and above it, there's basically like open air, like way up into like the 60s. And then on the downside, I mean, it's had a pretty big bounce, and it seems like mid, possibly like low 40 area could be if it fails. Um, I feel like 10 points either way potentially will probably be more bullish bias, just because like that's where it seems like the bigger moves have been happening on the upside here. Um, so I like this one for a strangle. Would have to add some sort of put position to it, because right now the open trade is a March call, so would have to add like a put to it, so maybe some sort of spread. So keep an eye out for that. I'll pass along an update on that one. Also, Thursday, keeping the big names going here. Trade Desk. This is a nice looking chart, huh? It's pricing in 20 points, so they're not giving options away for free. That's for sure. You can make the argument it's kind of like Twilio, where stock has had a big run and expectations are really high, but I would argue that the setup is slightly better, because it's just pushing up into resistance, so it's not at a 52-week high and just running and running and running. Yes, it's had a big run into it, but it still hasn't taken out the high from earlier from last year. So we've traded this one pretty well in the past, and I still like the upside here. I mean, like, the numbers have been fantastic, really, and maybe you get like a pent-up breakout at 20 points, though. It's going to have to be some sort of lower debit strategy, so like a fly, maybe like a spread, options are expensive, so it would have to be something to get in line with like the risk parameters I like. But I do like the upside on this one, and I like the setup. It could still be explosive here if it gets through 160 with volume. All right, wrapping up the big names after the close on Thursday, Roku. All right, 7 points is the price to move here. This stock has been acting much, much better. So it got the pop in January after, I think it was like strong. There were some sort of strong numbers that came out. And it's been kind of grinding. It's flagging above 50, and it has a really well-defined gap from last quarter. So the thing with Roku is the chart says bullish, right? But there's been quarters in the past where it's had negative reactions to like positive numbers, so it's kind of tough. It makes me a little bit more cautious. The thing is, like, I don't mind waiting and not being involved in earnings on this, because this thing has a history of trending after it reports. So you could see, right? Gap down and then trended for a month, gap up and then trend for like a month and a half. So, I'm thinking I'll probably be on the sidelines, because I don't mind missing the first move if it has like a history of like giving you opportunity after, and this one does. So, even though like I think it could be a mover, and it looks like that there's plenty of room either direction, probably more bullish on the upside here. It's just I'd rather wait, see what the numbers look like, see what the chart looks like, and then it's demonstrated in the past that there's opportunity post earnings, so that's probably the way I'm going to approach it. All right, wrapping up the week, Friday. Wayfair, pricing in about 14 points, which sounds like a lot, but for Wayfair, it's not as bad as I was expecting. The reason is because obviously it's a holiday quarter, right? So they did give they did give some numbers back in December here. So it was end of November. So they did give some numbers preliminary. But that was a while ago, and a lot has changed. So they're going to give full year guidance, so on and so forth. And this stock has been in a really tight consolidation just over the last like 2 weeks, right around 120. So it's had some big reactions in the past, and it moved about 20 points last quarter. So again, they basically like the stock is pricing at 14, but it's also the holiday quarter. So that actually doesn't seem too bad. If positive, I mean, there's really not a whole lot on the upside up until like the 150 area. This thing is still heavily shorted. On the downside, you're probably looking at something maybe back into like the moving after congestion area, so 110 to like 100, so anywhere from like 12 to 20. I like the idea of a strangle, but would probably be favoring the bull side, just because the holiday sales update seems that the sales have just been strong, um, and yeah, just the overall character, right? I mean, it seems that risk reward has been better on the bull side just in general. I mean, it's been tough to get paid on things that have gotten hit, so risk reward favors bullish bets at the moment. I mean, at some point that's going to change, but for right now, that's just how the market is. So I'm thinking probably strangle, but maybe like a 2-to-1 risk reward setup, or two to one risk profile favoring the bull versus the bear, something like that. All right. So as you can see, there's it's a short week, and we're getting to the tail end of earnings season, but that doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of interesting names. I mean, just Thursday alone, I mean, there's 5 or 6 names that could really be big movers. Um, so lots to look forward to. But most importantly, 3-day weekends. It's great to disconnect, right? Spend Saturday and Sunday just disconnecting. Monday you can spend the day like catching up on research, but it's always good just to like recharge the batteries, as we say, and just get the mindset back into like a fresh state and come back ready Tuesday and ready to go. So I hope you guys enjoy 3-day weekend, and looking forward to our coaching session next week. So because of Monday's holiday, that's going to push back to Thursday. So just like a side note there. So it's not Monday because we're closed. So it's going to be Thursday. But I'll make like an announcement again, and I'll make sure to pass along another update in the nightly letter. So just keep an eye out for that. All right. So have a wonderful night, fantastic weekend, and I'll talk to you guys all next week.